And thank you so much for joining us for another edition of All Angles. I'm Dion Jacksmiller. So, a difference in law and culture over same-sex marriage manifesting in diplomatic, shall we call it, exchanges between Jamaica and the United States. Going to be talking about that a little later on in the program. But first, shocking news that the two most senior executives at one of Jamaica's most prominent financial organizations are on their way out. CEO Patrick Hilton and Deputy CEO Dennis Coyne of the NCB Financial Group are leaving after 2 decades with the organization, and the news comes just after reports that Group Chairman Michael Lee Chin had publicly expressed his frustration, along with the frustration of many other shareholders, with the non-payment of dividends for over 2 years. He cut short a leave of absence to return to work. So joining me in studio to discuss these issues, we have Business Content Manager at the Jamaica Observer, Dashan Hendricks. Also with us, financial educator and consultant Keisha Bailey. On Zoom, we have development economist Dr. Christian Stokes, and we thank you all so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. So, Dashan, let me start with you because I know you've been following the news. I did use the words there, shocking news. Was it for you?
Well, in terms of which one of the news?
Barring your internal sources.
Which one of the news being
that,
shocking?
The CEO and Deputy CEO were leaving.
Yeah, certainly shocking, of course, because there are some issues that are brewing in the public's domain over some time about arguments certainly about their compensation vis-a-vis shareholders not getting dividends. And I spoke to Michael Lee Chin last week and I did an article which he expressed his disappointment, saying that he's not happy with the situation. But that was last week. To come into this week, Monday morning, and wake up to messages that, hey, Patrick Hilton and Dennis Coyne have been sent on leave was really a shock.
Let's contextualize it a little bit, Keisha Bailey, because as I mentioned, it's been 2 years now. And when you look at what has happened to the share price of NCB, I mean, we had at one point, shares were trading for $249. That was in the heady days of July 2019. That's when people were thinking, hold on, this now stop, go up.
Yeah, straight to the moon.
Up and up and up. And today traded at, the share price closed at 65.93, which is about 75% fall over that period of time. So give us a little bit of context there.
But to put it in long-term context, yes, a massive decline. But since the news broke, the share price is higher. Because the releases, what we saw is that the share price was hovering around $65 for a period of time. It's now higher. It was higher yesterday. And a second day gains as well. So the news is being met with higher investor confidence. There's more buying coming back into the market. That's what we're seeing in these 2 days.
Is it necessarily their departure, you think, though, or the suggestion coming from Lee Chin, say, come, dividend time now?
It's the dividends for sure. One thing we know, investors love dividends, love regular cash flows in hand. And so the news around Michael Lee Chin's displeasure with dividends is pushing it now. Persons are saying, well, he's back in the forefront. We can count on some dividends coming soon. A meeting is going to be scheduled soon. So let's see if there's going to be a dividend declared. That's what investors are buying into.
Chris Stokes, I'm going to bring you here in on this because, I mean, Michael Lee Chin is one man though. You have a whole board that had been, making these kinds of decisions, sure, on the recommendation of management, but still, it's the board who has been making these decisions over the past 2 years. Well, so it's too much being put on Hilton and Coyne.
I think there's a conflation of issues. I think that there's reason on behalf of some of the leadership of NCB that the gentlemen be out. But I don't connect the dots between the two issues. Now, we must be very clear. It is the board of directors that declares dividends. The management can make a recommendation. They can accept or reject it. It goes to audit committee and it goes to the BOJ. Yes, we're good to go. A dividend is declared. So to say that, to imply that management or these gentlemen are holding up the declaration of dividends and I'm going to intervene so that dividends can be paid is misguided and certainly doesn't leave the right impression. And it's very similar with the salaries as well. I believe there's an issue around direction and the compensation that has led to the separation. I think the matter of the dividends, putting that on the executives is a red herring. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I think, as people look at NCB's profits, and we can talk about that, and the stock price, it presents a buying opportunity. And of course, the expectation now that there will be additional dividends will, of course, drive some buying. What I would say as a banker and an economist is that I suspect that there was a very good reason for the gentleman not to propose dividend payments during that period, and that is yet to be seen.
Josh.
Speaking to Patrick yesterday, I raised that issue with him. I said non-declaration of dividend, non-proposing, not recommending a dividend to the board. What do you do about that? What do you say about that? And he said, Dashan, it was just a judgment call, looking at the economy, looking at how things are going. We said to ourselves,
COVID.
do we repeat?
Implications of COVID.
Yeah, going forward, and he was saying we need to build up some buffers to ensure that this bank, which is the biggest bank in Jamaica, has enough strength in terms of capital in the bank to proverbial bank to weather any storm that comes. I say it's just a judgment call. People may not see eye to eye with him in making that judgment call because, as Chris pointed out, for the board to consider a dividend, the management of the company must first propose a dividend to the board, and none has been proposed. So the board cannot consider a dividend that has never been proposed. What the management has been doing is that they have been sending money into retained earnings, building that buffer, and trying to ensure that they build that strength against any wind that may come. And that was just the reason. He said it's a judgment call that he made, rightly or wrongly so. No dividend has been paid. The last one paid in May 2021. That's 2 years now. And apart from a short period between April 2020 and April 2021, when the Bank of Jamaica mandated that financial companies pay no dividend because of how COVID was dealing with the global economy, people used to put on their pot for dividend from NCB every quarter.
Yeah, because for a lot of investors, right, that's critical, especially
the cash flow is critical. But the move also to buffer the capital adequacy is important because there are stricter capital regulations coming. So I can see the reasoning behind NCB management in bolstering the capital reserves because uncertainty is there, but also higher capital requirements are going to be mandated. And so the bank, being so large, has to be somewhat more or less conservative in their strategies to be able to meet the regulatory requirements.
When you look at from the perspective of the average shareholder, though, they look and they say, hold on, 40 billion profit, that sounds like a good buffer. That sounds like a nice buffer.
And the retained earnings at 75 billion.
Yes. Safe, secure. That's what it is. The dividend discussion is a whole other thing, though, because you can argue it as well that, with no dividends, if the share price were moving higher, investors could say, well, maybe I sell some of my shares then to get that cash flow. But it's a double whammy of no dividends and falling share price, hence the frustration.
Before we go to Chris, on the share price, something to note, at $65 today, roughly, even the NCB share price is close to a 6-year low. Yeah. I mean, it's since 2017, the price has not been around this level, even though it went to $249. So it's really down. And the regulatory thing, you have Basel III, which is going to affect how the bank reports its earnings.
Right.
You have,
Speak English. Have a general audience.
All right. It's kind of difficult but there are new regulations coming.
That works.
There are new regulations coming which they need to buffer themselves against. Plus, with the interest rate environment that we are in as well, they have to buffer themselves against that. And the new regulations for the bank and the insurance company. Remember, NCB has the largest insurance company in the Caribbean, Guardian Holdings. And the regulations are changing in terms of how you report in terms of that. So a lot of that, the building of the buffer is to strengthen the bank against those new changes in the regulations that are coming.
So you're coming in, Crystal.
Yeah, yes. Just to make the point, JP Morgan, which is the gold standard for banks, their CEO has a philosophy about capital
Well, hold that thought. Let me go to break and we'll pick up when we come back. Remember our hashtag as well is TVJ All Angles. Remember also our WhatsApp line 3810072. Give us your first name, your general location. Soon come.